this, you may have seen and noticed that over the weeks of June and July, the teacher is going to be talking about the heart practices, the Brahma Viharas. And a couple of weeks ago, I know Ian talked about metta, which is the first of the Brahma Viharas. And I'm going to today talk about mudita, which is the idea of being happy for someone else's happiness, being joyful for someone else's joy. And it's they're being happy at someone else's wholesome good fortune. Let me put that right out there at the beginning. It's not good happy because somebody robbed a bank and now they have a lot of money. It's wholesome good fortune where they're in a new relationship or got a job or had a baby or whatever it is that brings them joy. Their flowers are blooming, their tomatoes are ripening, whatever it is that you are celebrating that. And it's one of the heart practices, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the Brahma Viharas, the four qualities, the metta, loving kindness, karuna, which is compassion, mudita, which is usually translated as sympathetic joy or appreciative joy, but I'll probably say mudita because it's easier than appreciative joy or sympathetic joy. And then equanimity, which is kind of the last of the four. And I was thinking about this the other day, and what occurred to me, it's like the equanimity is the foundation of these heart practices. And because what equanimity is, it's a balance, but it's also an appropriate response. So you have equanimity holding the foundation, and then if you come across something that's painful or unpleasant or some sadness, the appropriate response, you greet that with compassion. And then if you come across something that's joyful or happy, you greet that with joy, for someone else's joy. And then the overarching way that we move through the world is with this flavor of metta, this flavor of friendliness, of loving kindness, this goodwill that we offer as we move through the world. If you look at the Eightfold Path, the second factor of the Eightfold Path, wise intention, it talks about metta, how we greet everything with friendliness. We don't, because if we're not friendly, there's a flavor of aversion there, which is one of the defilements, the poisons that we greed, hatred, aversion, ignorance, delusion, that we want to stay away from. So we just say, hey, it's like in our meditation practice, we say, okay, right now it's like this. Doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean we give our stamp of approval to things that are harmful, but we go, okay, this is the way it is. We're open to the reality of the moment. So mudita is one of these qualities, appreciative joy. And Sharon Salzberg, who wrote the book Loving Kindness, I'm sure you're familiar with it because it's quite a classic, and she goes through each of these four qualities, and she said about mudita, it's a rare and beautiful quality to feel truly happy when others are happy. Like it's really a beautiful quality, and it's I don't know where I heard the phrase, but I heard it described as generosity of the heart, which I think is really sweet. And mudita is really, I think, an important practice, especially right now, because of all the harshness in the world. There's a tremendous harshness. You see it every day. If you turn on the news, if you even listen casually to people's conversations or read things, there's a lot of gotchas and harsh talk and violence. And so mudita is a really excellent tool, for an excellent practice for softening the heart, for creating connection with one another. It's an antidote to separateness. It's an antidote to anger. We're really in a world of dehumanizing each other and creating worlds of us and them. And mudita is a way to bridge that separateness. And it's really, when you think about mudita, it's exquisite When you think about someone you care about who's had good fortune, good news. I have a friend who's just gotten into a relationship, a new relationship. And when I see her smile, it's just like it lights up, it just lights me up because I see her happiness and I'm so happy for her. And what happens when we are happy at the joy of others, we get out of self. We're no longer going, oh, what has that got to do with me? We're just totally aware of the other person without worrying about how we're in the picture too. How does this reflect on me? What does this mean about me? It's really a perfectly a practice of not being attached to that sense of I, me, and my. It's really wonderful. When we celebrate, we're no longer judging, we're no longer doing any of those things. And it can arise spontaneously, and it does arise spontaneously, especially with people we care about. But as with all of these heart practices, we often need to cultivate them because we've been habituated to think differently. We're in a very competitive society. We have to be successful. If you're not successful, it's obviously your fault. You did something wrong. And I think of Vince Lombardi, the football coach, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. And it's like, well, that doesn't leave a lot of options if you have to win, because obviously someone doesn't win. If you're in this competition, someone's going to come in number 2 or number 3. And we're stuck in this habituated way of thinking about how everything relates to us, this selfing. And it's this zero-sum thinking that there's winners and losers. There's a series that's on, I don't know if it's Discovery or the History Channel, and it kind of looks at the titans of industry in the United States, going back to, like the Rockefellers and Ford, and up through the woman who invented Barbie and Mattel and candy and all the industry that we've had in the United States. And when someone's really successful and someone else is more successful, all of a sudden they're the enemy. And it's like, but why do you have to have that enemy mentality? You have a very good product. Your people are being paid. You're making a good living. People are enjoying it. But it's just fostering this sense of competitiveness. So that's kind of the water we swim in. This sense of, what does that mean about me? And it's challenging to be happy for the success of others because we think it diminishes our chances at happiness, our chances at success. We've got this sense of insecurity around everything. And so our difficulty with mudita can show up in judging people, in prejudice, whatever bias you have. We can somehow say, oh, they don't deserve it for some reason, or there's envy. Where's mine? You got yours. Where's mine? We get stuck in comparison. We sometimes get stuck in, I don't know if we get stuck in it, but sometimes we go to the place of Schadenfreude, which is such a great word, which means it's basically the opposite of mudita. It's the giddiness at the misfortune of others. It's when we're happy when other people fail. And that's like, what? That's so antithetical to what the Buddha taught. We have to recognize that. And mudita, we get stuck in, we get stuck in jealousy, that gets in the way, that enviousness, we get resentful, we get angry at other people's success. We can't feel genuine joy for them. It's really challenging to feel mudita when we're stuck in these stories of lack and jealousy and resentment. And so much of it is driven by fear that we'll be okay or we won't be okay. And we're stuck once more time in that story of self, that story of separation. And what we see happening now, which is a historical story, is if we're struggling, we have to find someone to blame. And so we're going to pick them. We're going to pick them. We're going to pick them. You know the story. Who's to blame? Pick a side, you know, because it's the other people's fault. We're living in this binary world of us and them. And it's that separation. There's so much of it on display right now. This dehumanization of others. You know, it's so much. It's so easy to dismiss others when we flatten them out to cardboard cutouts. You know, because when we dehumanize, we don't have to feel. We've labeled them not human, they're dehumanized. We don't have to feel guilty for our actions. This is the roots of slavery, the roots of anti-blackness, the roots of so many things in our society. Anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant, anti-Semitism, anti-Islam, anti-Muslim. All these things, us and them, they're a stereotype. They're a particular picture. So we don't have to feel. But the problem is when we dehumanize others, we dehumanize ourselves. We've cut ourselves off from our humanity. And it's really, I mean, we all suffer. We all suffer. And going back to, I remember this mudita, I think I probably mentioned it, was the most difficult one of the heart practices for me. And it goes back to, I remember as a child, I must have been 7 or 8 years old, and my best friend, I don't remember the exact situation, but I think I broke one of her toys. So I remember her name, Linda Brill. We were born the same day. We were the same age. And I broke one of her toys, and so I had to give her one of my toys. And I had a little toy box with my toys in it. And she came over, and I remember she looked in, and she pulled out it was like a little iron, like an iron, which I never played with. But I didn't want her to have it, because I don't want it, but you can't have it, because what if? And that was like 7 or 8 years old. That's not conscious. That's just this built-in fear that arises of not enough, insecurity, what if, and none of this stuff is not a conscious decision most of the time. Most of the time it's not conscious. We just have these thoughts. I mean, I did that with relationships. I know I was in a relationship, wanted to get married, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to get married. And we broke up, and then he went out with someone else, and I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe we should talk about marriage again. It's like, I don't want you until somebody else wants you. And then I want you back. And it's this fear that drives us to do these things and act in crazy ways. And so this mudita is a way to begin to break down those barriers, break down the separateness, break down those walls that keep us in this place of lack and not enough. Because Voltaire has this wonderful definition. He says, appreciation is a wonderful thing. It can make what is excellent in others belong to us as well. So that when we can let go of this story of lack and celebrate others and celebrate what they have, we begin to experience that as well. We begin to have a flavor of that joy. As I mentioned, my girlfriend who's in this new relationship, and her beaming smile just fills me up because I'm so happy for her. Her happiness bleeds out into, I don't know if that's the right word, but that fills me up as well. You know, and one of I use this sentence, I say, the problem with mudita, and it's not really a problem, but sometimes it can be seen as a problem. And the problem with mudita and all the heart practices is that they are unconditional. Damn it. Because we create these ideas, like I was talking about a second ago. It's like, they're worthy, they're not worthy. They're the root of all my problems. I like them. I'll be happy for them. I'm happy when they suffer. I'm happy when bad things happen to them, or they don't get what they want, or I beat them in something, because It's always the comparing mind, the I, me, my, them must win at all costs. And there's a person who, I'm not sure who this person is, but I've seen them. They have a number of writings around this. C.F. Knight, who said it is craving, one of the three defilements: greed, craving. It's craving that gives rise to jealousy, envy, covetous, I can't say it, avarice, and greed in all its manifestations. Here it is that when mudita is practiced and developed, it becomes a sublime and boundless state of mind to be dwelt in as a corrective characteristic for their removal. So that when we practice mudita, it begins to root out that greed. It roots out that envy. It roots out that jealousy, because we begin to have this connection with this other person and at a human level, where we begin to rehumanize. We have this shared humanity. We have joy, compassion, gratitude. We remember each of us is human. Each of us is flesh and blood. We've rehumanized those folks we feel hostility towards or don't like, or even just annoyance with. I'm so annoyed with the people who park in front of my house and move my garbage cans, and it's annoying. And but I can so easily label them, they. And that's a cardboard, that's a flat, two-dimensional idea of a person. They're not fleshed out, they're not humanity. And in Loving Kindness, Sharon Salzberg talks about, she has a quote from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in talking about mudita. And Longfellow said, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each person's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. We see their story. We recognize their humanity. And she said, everyone's life is by nature continually vulnerable to pain. Remembering this is our gateway to mudita, to rehumanize people we don't like. It doesn't mean we condone harm, but we don't turn these people out of our hearts. It's messy. It's incredibly messy, but we have to embrace that messiness. And it's really hard to chip away the years of rigidity of our conditioned beliefs. But it serves us to practice joy, because through this practice, we begin to drop the aversion and we begin to reconnect. And I started reading this book. I've had it for over a year, and I just got around to starting it last week, I think. It's called See No Stranger by Valerie Kaur. Some of you may know that. Her last name is Kaur. And she's a Sikh, Sikh. That's her religion. And she talks about how they have no strangers. Everyone's a friend. And she's talking about if we can do about wonder, the wonder we begin to have about other people. I remember a few years ago, I was just taking a walk around my neighborhood, and I saw this little old man walking with a cane very slowly down the block. And instead of just passing him by, I stopped and I wondered, it just fantasy in my brain going, gee, I wonder if he was at Normandy. I wonder if he was at the D-Day beachhead, in Normandy. Oh, just like giving this person an aspect of flesh and blood that I would normally not think 2 cents of, but it animates them in a way that I'm not used to doing, and it makes it harder to be harmful or to be harsh. I mean, all these practices support each other. I mean, harsh speech, wise speech, that practicing wise speech supports mudita and the other heart practices. The heart practices support the Eightfold Path and the precepts. They're all intertwined. So she says in the book, if we are nurtured enough to develop our capacity to wonder, we start to wonder about the people in our lives too, their thoughts and experiences, their pain and joy, their wants and needs. We begin to sense that they are to themselves as vast and complex as we are to ourselves, their inner world as infinite as our own. In other words, we are seeing them as our equal, unconditional. As the Buddha says in the Metta Sutta, we offer this to all beings, omitting none. These people are our equals. And she goes on to say, it's easy to wonder about the internal life of the people closest to us. It's harder to wonder about the people who seem like strangers or outsiders. But when we choose to wonder about people we don't know, when we imagine their lives and listen for their stories, we begin to expand the circle of those we see as part of us. We prepare ourselves to love beyond what evolution requires. And she writes in another paragraph, this last paragraph I'll read of hers, which I really love because we learn in this practice, in these teachings, that we're interconnected, all beings. We want to extend loving kindness. We want to extend our hearts to all beings, omitting none. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about interbeing, how we inter-are. And I love this paragraph. She says, what has been an ancient spiritual truth, because Sikhs come out of India as well, what has been an ancient spiritual truth is now increasingly verified by science. We are all indivisibly part of one another. We share a common ancestry with everyone and everything alive on earth. The air we breathe contains atoms that have passed through the lungs of ancestors long dead. Our bodies are composed of the same elements created deep inside the furnaces of long dead stars. We can look upon the face of anyone or anything around us and say, as a moral declaration and a spiritual, cosmological, and biological fact, you are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me that I do not yet know, which I think points to the title of the book, which is See No Stranger. And when we see no stranger, we can't dehumanize, and we can begin to experience joy. And mudita, this practice of mudita, allows us to begin to see others as part of us that we do not know yet. I just don't know you yet. I wonder about you, but I don't know you. And why would we not be happy and joyful for parts of ourselves? I'm happy when I get a good meal and my tummy's full. Yay! So I would think about that for all beings, and that's the challenge of the practice so often, is to see our connectivity. All the stories of difference are the stories. I mean, we are different. Obviously, we come from different places. We look differently. We have different experiences. There's vast differences, but there's also that connection that we have that's so easy to discard when we do us and them. And if you see it, you can have two warring factions, and then another faction comes in and starts attacking both of them, and then they come together and fight against the other faction until that third one is gone, and then they go back to fighting each other. So these barriers are malleable. Doesn't always have to be. The Buddha says we get rid of fixed views. We get rid of that rigidity of it must be this way. I'm doing this because I've always done that. That habit of mind is when we're stuck. It's when we can release those habits of mind that there's an absolute freedom. There's this openness to this moment. What's right here, And I'm going to say it because it has to be said, and because people always talk about this, it doesn't mean we open our doors to people who cause us harm. We have discernment, we have wisdom, we have clarity, we have compassion. We see reality as it is, but we don't throw people away. We don't toss them out of our hearts because they're causing harm. We work to do what we can in whatever capacity, wherever we are, to end injustice, to end harm where we see it. But we don't harden our hearts. I love baseball, and there's a team I follow, and a couple of the pitchers on the team are not good, and I follow this online group, and they're talking about, and they're going, "Oh, he's just garbage." And I'm watching that language. They're saying, he's garbage, he sucks. And I'm like, no, his pitching may be garbage, but he's not garbage. But it's so easy for us to fall into that way of talking and thinking about others. They are X, Y, or Z. They're not worthy of whatever it is we think. And it's really important to notice those things. We don't discard people. We have fierce compassion, we have accountability, but we have an open-heartedness as well. And we celebrate joys for all people. Even people who are suffering can have joy in their life. It doesn't have to be what we think it's supposed to be. And there's an intentionality to this practice. We recognize when it's hard. Sharon Salzberg has practices in the book for all of the Brahma Viharas. We start with someone we care about and learn to recognize mudita when it shows up. We soften our hearts. I remember thinking, years ago, I grew up in New York City, and I came out here many, many years ago, and I've never been to the Rose Parade, but people love it. And I mentioned, I think I was dismissive. I used to be so dismissive. I don't want to do something, therefore I was dismissive of, because I thought it was stupid. So I am dismissive of people who like it a lot. And I remember being very dismissive of people who went to the Rose Parade, slept overnight in Pasadena, get up early and see the floats. And I'd be like, oh, why would you want to do that? Because I was like, I had a pea brain and had no clue about the world. And it's like, oh, it rained. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, it's cold. But then, through this practice and through opening up and through seeing how I was so focused on particular things, I was able to, I remember one time it rained and they got rained on and the Rose Parade was postponed or whatever. And I felt compassion for them. And it's like, oh, wow. Who knew? It's because we have an intentionality of opening our hearts to others. And sometimes I taught this last night. I'd have a 5 o'clock Saturday class, and I gave this talk last night as well. And somebody asked a question, which I thought was really a good question. She said, how do you hold multiple things? And she went back to a sports metaphor because it was an easy one. A sports example is easier than some of the bigger questions that we're dealing with today. And she said, you have a team who loses and a team who wins, and there's joy for the team who wins. And what about the team who loses? And this is exactly where that balance of equanimity is. You can have both mudita and compassion. I mean, even when my team wins in sports, I see the people who lost and my heart breaks for them because, they poured everything into it if it's like a championship. And so there's joy and there's sadness. We can do both. We have this, the Buddha in the suttas, because these practices that Sharon Salzberg teaches are later. They're not what the Buddha taught in the suttas. They're from the Visuddhimagga, which were written a few centuries after the Buddha. It was kind of a systematization of his teachings. But he said, we sit We live with a heart, a mind imbued with loving kindness, with compassion, with appreciative joy, with equanimity. It's how we move through the world. We greet everything with appropriate response. So we can hold those two experiences together. We can have joy and we can have compassion. They're not mutually exclusive. That's the absolute being present to what's happening. And then another question came up. It's like, and I can't remember exactly the question, but it's like I had an experience. I had a few years ago, a friend of mine got accepted to a training program that was really exciting. I was really happy for her. But then all of a sudden I noticed jealousy. It's like, here's mudita on one hand and here's envy on the other. It's like, but wait a minute. Because we think, well, if I have mudita, then I can't have envy. You know, we have these absolutes, right? It's an absolute, it's either or. And it's like, it's not always a binary. It's like, yay, happy, B, envy shows up, jealousy shows up. And this is where the clarity, the mindfulness shows up. It's like, oh, look, here's jealousy. It's not my fault. It just showed up. Recognize the emotions that show up. Again, you can carry more than one experience at the same time, happiness and and so it's just like, okay, jealousy, be there. I remember when it first arrives, like, I'm not supposed to feel jealous. I'm blah blah blah. I don't even want to do what she's doing. Blah 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 blah. But Thich Nhat Hanh talks often about the seeds of consciousness, where we have these seeds planted because of our conditioning, because of our experiences, because of how we were shaped by the world. And when conditions are right, these things blossom. Conditions were ripe for jealousy to blossom because that's what's my habitual pattern. Jealousy, envy, so jealous, so envious. But we have the clarity to recognize it and no longer let it run the show. It's like when anger shows up, you go, oh, hi, anger, have a seat, greet you, acknowledge you're here, no judgment. Oh, you're not supposed to feel angry. It's like, no, there it is. You have to acknowledge the reality of the moment and let it have a seat and not let it run the show. I go about my business knowing that these emotions are here, these challenging emotions, but they no longer rule. I have discernment. We have wisdom. We have clarity to move wisely now. So it's not, we're going to get there and then we're there. That would be enlightenment. I don't know what that's like because I'm not enlightened, but I know what the journey away from the caught so much in wanting and not wanting and craving and not craving and greed and hatred and delusion. There's a journey into a spaciousness, an awareness. And luckily, most of the time when I do get caught up in those stories of, where's mine? I can recognize it a little sooner because I'm attuned to the body. We begin to recognize what it feels like in the body and go, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? Come back, be present, be present. And the more we practice, the more we open our hearts, the more spontaneous we feel. The more spontaneous those responses are, the more spontaneous mudita is, the more spontaneous compassion is, the more we move through the world with kindness and loving kindness and friendliness. There's the equanimity to be intimate with whatever our experience is. So I invite you to recognize mudita in your life when you see it. Recognize when it gets in the way. I always ask the question, what gets in the way? What's keeping you from experiencing mudita? Or if there's mudita, what else might be present? If there's mudita and there's maybe something else. So those are my thoughts, my friends, on I think a really important practice. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your rebuttals. all of the above. So thank you, and I hope it has been of some benefit. So how do you deal with mudita or not? Or what gets in your way? Or is this like your favorite thing in the world to be happy for others? Thank you. Well, thank you so much, my friends, for being here. It was a delight, as always, to be with you. I think I'll be back in a few weeks. I can't remember, but someone will be here now. Oh, Ian. No, I don't remember. I I can't remember. It's on the website. So go to Desert Insight. Oh my God, it's late on a Sunday. I have no brain left. So you know the website. Go look, see Sundays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Fridays, and then July 20th for our next half day in person. And I know Marisol does. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Jason. Put Desert Insight, and there's a support link in the on the website where you can offer Dana, which is a way to support the teachers. It's a way to support the organization, and it's really helpful to keep us going. And so whatever you can offer, it really makes a big difference in paying it forward. So thank you in advance for your generosity, and you can be a monthly supporter too. So when these announcements come on at the end of classes, you can say, "I'm already giving." So that option's available as well on the website. You can check that out. And thank you again. And remember that we practice not just for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. Thanks, y'all. Much love.